Richard. How you doing, Richard?
Hi.
Kevin, I'm never better. Not partly
Hi.
because I was quite a large
How are you?
investor in scale. So I've had quite a nice
Hi.
day for many reasons
Hi.
today. If
Where are you
anybody's
from?
been watching the markets.
France.
Wonderful to be here. I
Oh,
have been in XR
c'est
here
awesome. Almost.
in alt space
Yeah, moi
before
aussi.
when you interviewed me for Already Hacker
Moi
One some
aussi.
time ago, and it's incredible to be back here. It's
Australia. Et
such
tu
a
es française?
phenomenal experience, both on the browser
Hello.
and, of course,
Française?
in the
No.
headsets.
Are you from
Delighted for
France?
those who are
What?
alt space
France.
VR
Beautiful.
experts and veterans who are here, but also
Yes,
those who've
thank you.
arrived for the first
Where
time.
do you come from?
You've got the ability to raise your hand switched on
Australia.
by me just now, looking for lots of
Yeah,
discussion,
good.
interaction today. We'll set the scene in a moment.
It's a
So,
good.
Kavi, thank you
Have
for
a good
welcoming
day.
me. And how are you
Me
today?
too.
I'm doing
Thank you.
great, Richard. And this is the second Metaverse Citizens Forum. The first one was the Virtual Citizens Forum that happened on the 73rd Human Rights Day. I'm just like really honored to start this conversation. Welcome our esteemed guests. We have Monal Siddiqui, Harry from Microsoft, and I'm sorry, Harry, I'm gonna butcher your last name, so I'm gonna make a failed attempt. Baladaris and Nikhil Malhotra. Baladaris.
Hey guys.
Oh,
Hey Kamya, thank you. Hey guys.
hey, hey. And it's such a great occasion because it's Women's History Month, and not sure, Richard, we are just truly grateful for all the women around the world, but definitely for all the women that help out XR Safety Initiative. And Richard, do you have something to add for MKAI? That's a very super inclusive community.
Certainly, we try our best. I mean, it's difficult to ever get these things perfect, but we I suppose, to not to sound too cheesy, but we are trying to be the change that we want to see in the world by the way that we run our organization. We are 70% female led. We're also across 6 different countries and pretty much all the continents. And we really do put an emphasis on creating the environments, events, projects where it is inclusive, learn how best to do that, to create the kind of safe spaces that allow that to flourish. And, we respect the similarity to respect the differences. I've got an incredible team, not just the ladies, but everybody of all genders that's on our team. We just live and breathe it. It's something that we absolutely believe in. A personal word from myself, my LinkedIn, I had a look at my own LinkedIn database in AI, and only 11% of my contacts are women in AI. So it really does shine a spotlight on the size and magnitude of this problem. So we're committed. We're on board wherever it takes, as long as we can do this, to change that balance in AI, but also in new industries, in blockchain, in Web3, in Metaverse, that we do not get heavily dominated industries by one gender. It's not right. It doesn't work, and it leads to all sorts of problems downstream. So we are in completely.
Yeah, and today we're going to explore the convergence of various different technologies that create the metaverse or are bringing together, in evolution. The evolution of metaverse is taking place because of these convergence and the impact that it will have on mankind. I would love to then, get started. Just for everyone's knowledge, you're muted at the moment, but you will be given, because this is a more town hall settings, once we introduce each other and sort of share a bit of a, context about, share a bit of a knowledge, would definitely allow Q&A, at which point you are supposed to come up to the mic that is in the center and you can ask your questions. This is supposed to be mainly for listening, but certainly we use this opportunity to interact with some of our esteemed speakers. They're doing great stuff, exploring this convergence of, AI, Web3, XR. And so why don't we get started, Richard?
Yeah, wonderful idea, Kavya. Let's make the
Yeah.
most of the time that we have today. We have so much to discuss. You hear me okay?
Yes, and you're going just a little bit in and out, maybe if you could
Am I?
close to the mic. But I
I'll
can
stay
hear you.
nice and close to this microphone then. Watching Marco soar up in the skies, which is fun. So yeah, 100% welcome today. So good. And to see you, and such an important conversation. doesn't it seem like in all of these different industries areas there are these windows, and they open for a while, and this window is open right now on how do we define and create a safe and inclusive metaverse. And that's why with real precedent, our organizations have come together, the wonderful XRSI, my goodness, the work that they do, we're just in awe of the people and the impact they're making. And then ourselves, doing what we can as well, bringing the best of AI, hopefully, into the XR space, what we're calling the conversion. So this is the Metaverse Citizens Forum. If we're right about this, then we want to be the premier conversation with all of you that creates the right dialogues across industry, across academia, across government. We are doing this because we want to address head on the emerging challenges. There is a convergence of technology. I've touched on it already around artificial intelligence, for one, extended realities of all kinds, connected devices, even vehicles and so on, making up spatial computing, and of course, headsets. Web3, blockchain, DLT, they're all coming together on what's going to be the evolution of the metaverse. And we have some big challenges. We are looking at a selection of companies that have built phenomenal products, but this is a different way of working now. Interoperability comes in a big way now, and privacy comes in a big way. And from my perspective, if one space in the metaverse has got phenomenal artificial intelligence, whatever that may entail, content creation, personalization, avatars, whatever that may entail, and then other metaverse spaces have no AI, are we really going to have that interoperability? So it's these kind of big questions and many others that we'll be doing today, and also throughout the year as we have these town hall style discussions. The speakers will be participating. I hope you'll be participating in too. We want to hear about the real life challenges. We want to find solutions. We want to hear your experiences, particularly when it pertains to human rights, digital rights, and how they play into the metaverse. I hope that these gatherings will reshape our society. If that sounds grand, then you'll forgive me, but that's certainly our aim. Why and what is the metaverse? Who will have access to it? More about those convergences and what do we need to take into account? What does this mean for societies? What does this mean for economies? Won't it be regulated?
Yeah. And, Richard, let's take it to our speakers who have graciously agreed to be here. Let's start with Carrie Villaris, who is here from Microsoft. Carrie, if you could unmute yourself, introduce, and then, what is your understanding of the metaverse? What is it? And then how are people supposed to find their rights? And, what are your advice, as we move fast towards this convergence?
Thanks. So yeah, my name is Carrie Valladares. I am a senior attorney at Microsoft, and I work with the team that is building Microsoft Mesh. So my understanding of the metaverse, obviously I think it's a word that's not really defined yet. Everyone kind of has a different idea. But if we set aside business models, I think the metaverse is a place where kind of your physical and digital worlds come together. Space VR is a great example. And, as metaverses become more and more prominent and more common, presumably there will be some, linking of them together across common platforms, and, some level of persistence and identity management that is unique, possibly, from how we use the internet today. I would say, I don't actually think, I think there are safety and inclusion issues that are exacerbated primarily by the persistence and identity aspects of the technology, but I don't know that I see a ton of wholly new issues. I think we can learn a lot from multiplayer gaming, from some of the challenges of privacy and safe spaces, anonymity that we've seen in the internet and social media in particular, and drawing on those issues is a good start for coming up with how to create a safe and inclusive, open, accessible metaverse. But I do think, as I said, there are some issues that are really exacerbated, and we will need to be creative in finding tools, probably beyond the standard notice and consent regime that we've mostly relied on in the past, in order to create the kind of space that is really going to make the most of the metaverse for everyone.
And Carrie, just to quickly, just logistically, if you could megaphone yourself so that everybody could hear, I could see that people started to come closer to the stage. Megaphone would allow everyone to kind of hear in the back as
Oh,
well.
so sorry. Yes, when I unmuted myself, I guess it didn't put me back into the megaphone. I'm sorry. Do I need
No,
to
no
repeat
worries.
anything I said or?
I think we heard. Yeah,
Okay,
everybody's
great,
giving a thumbs up. That's wonderful.
great.
And
Thank you.
welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. And
Of
now I'm going
course.
to go over to Manal Siddiqui. Manal, same thing. If you could unmute yourself and please enable the megaphone so everybody could hear you.
Am I still echoing?
You're okay.
That sounds good.
If you just need to enable your megaphone.
Oh, I thought I did.
Still a little soft.
Yeah, I don't see the microphone on for now just yet.
There, you are. You're a
That's
megaphone.
setting.
Yep.
Okay, great.
Good. All right. Perfect. Hi, everyone. I'm Manal Siddiqui. I'm the CEO and co-founder. I see somebody waving in the crowd. This is so cool. Okay. My first time in alt space VR, clearly.
Fans are here now.
And so I'm the CEO and co-founder of a startup in Toronto called Transitional Forms. And effectively what we're doing is expanding on co-creation capabilities with AI and merging culture and AI to really power the next generation of generative autonomous content. What the metaverse means to us, and I don't feign to be an expert in the metaverse as the conversation's still evolving, but what it represents to us and myself is the next evolution of our cultural identities. And what I mean by that is, of course, we're in the entertainment innovation business and the entertainment innovation space, but what we're seeing is an an evolution from internet culture into more digital and virtual spaces where our physical and our digital culture start merging into one. And so my fellow panelists like raised a number of really good issues, and succinctly described, where we are in the status of the issues we need to consider. My opening bid here is, with artificial intelligence in the mix, I think there are quite a number of problems with the technology and the way it's being designed and the power structures and design decisions where they're being made, that will just be really exacerbated in spaces where we start using the technology without understanding it. And it's my hope that in creating art, it allows you to play around with these, very powerful tools and technologies, that helps you understand what machine intelligence is, the state of it, and how it's evolving. And if we want to really supercharge a safe and inclusive future, we need to understand that AI is currently encoding the way systems are in the physical world and the biases and the power dynamics and all our historical legacies. And if we really truly are committed to creating a safe and inclusive future in the metaverse, we really need to start. We have an opportunity, but we really need to start looking at it now, and really understanding it.
Totally. Thank you so much for that, Manal, and thank you for being here. Thank you for exploring this intersection of AI and other converging technologies. Let me go over to Nikhil. Nikhil, you from Tech Mahindra, innovating a lot, and please share with us, what are you guys up to, and how do you see this metaverse? What is it, and how are we going to actually deal with this?
All right, brilliant. Kavya, can you hear me right?
So far I can hear you. Let me check if your megaphone, Nikhil. If you could megaphone yourself. And
Is that okay? Can you hear me now?
I can certainly hear you. If you could, click on megaphone, so everybody else could hear you as well.
Okay. Yeah, I have now. Can you hear me now?
Perfect. Perfect. Yes, that's perfect.
Brilliant. All right. So I think first of all, thank you so much. It's so cool to be in an environment like this, and you can actually see people around, and this is really cool. This is the verse itself. But I'm by the way, my name is Nikhil. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer for Tech Mahindra, and we've been dabbling with Metaverse for the last even before the term was coined as Metaverse. We've been dabbling with a lot of this, but the term's coined now, and it's now called Metaverse. I think from a technological perspective, Kavya, I look at Metaverse as 7 layers. I think people over here would have read about it, but it really starts out from the infrastructure itself, right? What's the connectivity? We are all here and we are connected, and that's the basic layer which gives us that value to connect to each other. The layer above it is, of course, the devices, right? You are today joined in here from your Oculus or your VR glasses, but also from your PC. That's the device layer that comes in. The layer on top of it is where you are actually connecting with machines and you're writing the software. So these are spatial softwares. You can see 2D being projected into 3D, and these are places which are coming in. Well, like Minal said, the color of tech is also changing because of the metaverse. Up till now, we have seen AI in a much more predictive fashion, in a much more inferential fashion. Now with metaverse, we're seeing AI which is much more generative. So that's the layer on top of it, which is the generation part. One change which metaverse has done, and we have all seen Second Life in its avatar. One change that metaverse is doing is the economy that it is creating. Right now, digital natives can actually trade in or can have economic transactions in the verse itself using blockchain and using cryptocurrencies as well. And that's the layer on top of it. And the last layer is the experience that you see here over here. It could be shopping, it could be retail, it could be this kind of a metaverse environment. I think from a point of view of problems, there are a lot that exist. Number one, any technology that we are building, we have ascertained ourselves that there are 3 principles that it should follow. It should be transparent, which it is in metaverse. It should be accountable, and it should be relatable and also integral to what I think what is happening is with this tech changing from prescriptive to generative format of the tech, you would see a larger problem across larger domains as you get in, right? You're talking about interoperability between different places. You're talking about interoperability between different engines. That's where generative facet may have a challenge in terms of what AI could do. The second is, of course, the ethical format of it, right? So are we transparent, right? We are all hidden under, or you could say behind my avatar. Are we being integral when we talk to the other person in the way that we would, right? So that's more psychological in terms of what we really think. So those are some of the challenges that we may feel in the metaverse, which we are here to talk about.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that, Nikhil. And then I'm going to go over to Richard. Richard, if you want to just, I know we sort of semi-introduced ourselves, but a bit about MKAI and, how are you seeing Metaverse and everything? And then we'll jump into some of the questions and then take questions from the audience.
You're very kind. I'm honestly here to hear from everybody else. To be honest, I'm going to try and do as little talking as I can today. MKAI, we are the inclusive AI community, mkai.org if you want to find us. Just for us, we live and breathe the consequences of large data capture. And so this is absolutely precedent to our work. If you want to go right out there, and I'm not saying we should cover this today, but if you want to get into the ideas around general or super intelligence from machines, then there's an idea here that data capture is going to be key. And when we have these smart speakers in our home, they may or may not be capturing billions or trillions of lines of code that has come from our conversations. Well, move that into the metaverse, and now for the first time ever, we can see interaction, emotion, and the complex social behaviors of humans in a way like we've never done before digitally. And we can capture that. I mean, we can create artificial humans. I don't think so, but it does mean that we can create incredibly convincing and powerful avatars. And when you've got a world where people already fall in love with a chatbot, it doesn't take much imagination to see what these AI avatars in the metaverse could be like in the future. Fantastic when you want to talk about simulating different ways and different ideas of doing things, but concerning. And as we know from social media, citizens, don't have a pretty good idea of what's going on behind the scenes, and they won't hear, especially young people. So anything we can do to support the safety, understanding, comprehension of people as we go into this massive data collection world is vital for us. And thank you for the opportunity to speak a little.
Yeah, thank you for moderating this with me, Richard. And today's session is supported by yet another passionate individual, as well as another government e-safety commissioner of Australia, Julie Inman Grant, who couldn't be here today with us. She's committed to ensuring safety is prioritized in the metaverse. We have been interacting behind the scenes, trying to understand, what should we potentially do about, getting in front of these things. So today we have a special message from Julie. If we could play Julie's message for everyone, for the metaverse citizens.
Hello, I'm Julie Inman Grant, Australia's e-safety commissioner. It's really pleasing to see that the industry is starting to make real strides in improving the overall levels of platform safety, and that they are doing this by adopting and applying core safety by design principles. Developed by eSafety in 2018, these safety by design principles, methodologies, and interactive assessment tools are all underpinned by the fundamental human rights of our society. The principles are a result of deep consultation with a broad range of stakeholders from across the digital ecosystem. Now, we want this proactive change, which has occurred thus far, to be applied in the context of the metaverse. This time, we can also change the design ethos from moving fast and breaking things, and even beyond moving fast together, to moving more thoughtfully, but backed by tangible action, building the safety protections in at the beginning rather than retrofitting after the damage has been done. And let's also move from profits at all costs to investing and innovating in practices that place the safety of the user at the center of the development process. It's a brave new world, and investments and innovation in both the physical and online safety of gamers and users in the metaverse should be paramount for this new technology frontier, with the need for governance frameworks designed to prevent and minimize potential harms.
What a wonderful message. And it is really, really encouraging to see. And this is why, XRSI, XR Safety Initiative, is trying to bring regulators, big tech industries. We have today Carrie with us from Microsoft, and, other industries collectively together to understand this, issue together, because that's what it's going to take. Julie Inman Grant is the first online safety regulator in Australia, worldwide, actually. So we're really inspired that we will have her help, and many other regulators over the course of years we'll hear from. And let me dive into a little bit about what is our understanding of the metaverse, what XRSI believes. So we created this kind of a stack where we think that metaverse citizens, first of all, we go from citizens because users, it seems like, it's not adequate when it comes to the metaverse, because even if you're not consuming augmented reality, for example, you're a bystander in someone else's reality, and your data will be captured. So it feels like people are going to need to be treated as individuals, as human citizens instead of users. In the metaverse, on the right-hand side, you see all these technologies that will converge, but you'll be able to connect, create, and potentially do commerce, whether it is centralized, decentralized, whether it's crypto-based economy. I myself used to be head of security for Linden Lab, which is, some of you may know, is the creator of the very first virtual world called Second Life. And that's where I firsthand was able to tackle some of these safety, security challenges. And that's what, at the bottom you'll see is the standards, is ethics. Those are the things that we really have to take into account as we go towards this convergence. And if we could go to the next slide, needs to be a global consideration. This is exercise research, and we have established this understanding. We're constantly discussing this understanding with big tech corporations, and these are the things that must be prioritized. People will be left behind. My sister back home, she doesn't understand any of this stuff is coming for us. So we have to educate people, because otherwise this digital divide will be amplified, and all these other issues that are coming for us. Why is this significant? If we go to the next slide, you'll see there is so much data that is at stake. So back in 2016, we had, and I don't know if we could go to the next slide. In 2016, back when I was over at Facebook, we had like 5,000 data points on each Americans we heard, and potentially the democracy was undermined. Now, with the rise of the metaverse, in 20 minutes, you can record over 2 million data points. So like, this is going to be crazy intensive. So all of that is fun and good. Now I'm going to go into some questions, and let me start with first question. Who is potentially going to regulate this? What is the regulation going to look like? And we have a lawyer in the room. Perhaps I should go to Carrie. Carrie, what do you think about this sort of regulatory aspect of the metaverse? And if you could just click the megaphone and then unmute yourself.
All right, there we go. I think I got it this time.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, so I mean, I think the expectation is that this will be regulated much like the internet has been regulated. The same kind of standard, privacy, security. I would say, looking ahead, much like other emerging technologies, we look to what is already existing and think about the principles that underlie that regulation, and then apply those principles to the new technology. So that's kind of the working assumption that at least I have been operating under. I don't expect there to be kind of some new, unforeseen regulatory body. Perhaps there's opportunity for standards organizations, and some standards agreement across the industry. Again, that's not a new regulatory scheme. And then, of course, there's always just the market regulating itself, right? Which, as you point out, depends, well, you alluded to, depends on people understanding kind of what they're getting and what's happening behind the scenes when they choose to engage with a product. So depending on transparency regulation and whether or not people fully understand what's going on, that could also be a useful tool for effective kind of de facto regulation of the metaverse.
That sounds
Yeah,
good.
that's so interesting to hear. Yeah. I wanted just to pick up on this point, Kavya. One of the things that Nick Hill mentioned in the introduction was the word relatable. I wonder how, Nick Hill, you would refer to that, given what we're hearing there from Carrie.
Sorry, yeah, Richard, that's a good point. I think I can't bypass what Carrie said. I think she's the lawyer, and that's the law. I think what she's saying is absolutely right. But I think what I can add is when you say relatable, it's devoid of biases, right? In certain cases of what I can relate to. So, for example, if I am going out for a loan, will the AI or will the system give me, because I'm so and so, and it's transparently telling me that I'm giving you a loan because of this, right? Or because of these conditions and parameters. That's number one. And it has to relate to me in terms of what we are doing. But I think I just wanted to add one point to what Carrie said. I think there would be regulations from government, there would be internet acts that may come in. I think there's a self-regulation required when we do get it into metaverse. It's kind of going back to the old Hippocratic oath, Richard, if I may say, right? So the idea is, if I am a developer or if I am a techie who's trying to build something in metaverse, I have to ensure from my end, or maybe my corporation has to ensure, that whatever I build is transparent, is relatable to a human being on the other end. But it's also ethical, right? I would not introduce a bug, or I would not make it cryptic so that people don't understand. I think that there's a kind of self-regulation mechanism that we'll have to all apply.
Exactly. Sort
Just
of like,
want to-
seems like
Yeah.
it comes down to sort of self-governance, isn't it, Richard? That's what I'm hearing.
Well, I'm very curious about this because we're hearing this phrase self-regulation come up a couple of times already, and we're only just into the start of this. But in our video, Julie referred to this as a brave new world. So I wonder if we could maybe just tackle this first. Is this just an evolution from our screens and apps into more spatial-led computing? Or is this fundamentally different? Is it a brave new world? Manal, perhaps you could have an opinion on that one.
Manal, same thing. Unmute, megaphone.
Oh, hang on. I apologize. Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay,
Yes,
perfect.
we hear you.
Let me know if it's not, if I'm not audible. I do have an opinion in the sense that I think the regulations, and I'll just bifurcate it here with the traditional regulations, right? Like landscape of regulations that bled into internet regulations. I think they will be insufficient within the metaverse. I think those regulations may apply to access points within the metaverse, and try to regulate how people access it. But the act of interacting within the metaverse and the imaginative possibilities that haven't yet taken hold will require new ways of thinking. Like I'm almost of the opinion it's a new world where you start building out like drafting new constitutions for interactions, because I don't believe the metaverse will function, or interactions within the metaverse will function necessarily the same way that we do in the physical spaces. You know, like think about emojis, think about different aspects of how interactions take place already within the internet, and it's within social media, sorry, and it's just been so hard for regulators to get on top of that. um, 15 years later, we're still trying to grapple with old world traditional regulations. So yes, I think already in place regulations will affect access points, but I do think there's a reimagination that will take place for governing interactions within the metaverse, where self-governance takes place. I'm going to be interested to see how DAOs um, and shared governance protocols come in to I guess the word regulate. I also think the word regulations will fall on deaf ears. There will be new forms that will start taking place.
Totally makes sense. And
Yeah.
clearly, I don't know if our regulators are ready for this. And this is kind of where XRSI sort of fits in. But then again, I want to go back to Carrie. I mean, from your experience being inside Microsoft and sort of interacting externally as well as internally, do you think our regulators are really ready for what's happening?
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't want to say the regulators aren't ready. I do think obviously this is complex technology. It requires, a deep understanding to truly, a deep technical knowledge to truly understand it. That's not what most regulators' expertise is. So that's always a challenge with any regulation, right? I mean, the same for me. Like, I'm a lawyer, I'm not an engineer. It's hard work to really understand what the technology is about and what's getting built and all the different permutations. I think, listening to the other panelists, I completely agree about the responsibility on individual companies to ethically, create a product and ship it. And I do believe that if industry doesn't choose kind of the path that is mindful of public policy and responsibility and does the right thing for customers, and even if the right thing is, who knows, right? Maybe there's a segment of people who are totally comfortable giving up all their data and having kind of whatever the model might be, but with full knowledge and full consent and really understanding what they're getting into. But I think if the world and the industry doesn't think carefully about how it builds and launches this technology, there will be regulation. And so the industry would be well served, I think, to kind of work together and be really careful and thoughtful, as I don't remember her name, but the speaker we heard from Australia, the
Julie?
official,
Yeah.
she said, really thoughtful, not necessarily slow, but mindful, and, safety by design, and working that into the technology. I think without that, there will certainly come regulation. And it's going to be difficult, especially for multinational companies like Microsoft, to meet, all of the different kind of cultural and social norms around the world that will relate to how this technology gets used. So this kind of event is great, where people can come together that do know the technology and understand its potential, to figure out what's the way to put it out there that is responsible and thoughtful and true to the principles that undermine kind of our current legal regime.
Yeah, Kavya, if I may add one point, right? So I think it's a balancing act between what Minal and what Carrie said, right? So at some point in time, you would have to lose out certain facets. You may call it regulation, you may not. But at the end of the day, if you look at it, different countries have different ways of looking at ethics, right? The principles are not the same. So as a result of that, you would have to have certain bit of regulation, which is very basal, which applies to a general thought, like a universal principle. And then you can keep on adding them as flares on top of it for different countries. And I think they would be, because ethics is a very subjective topic, and it is very subjective in terms of what you do in different countries.
Yeah, I want to pick up on that, Nikhil. I was going to come to you anyway, but I'll loop back, because I was going to ask you a little bit about foresight in your role, in your innovation role in large corporation. But Manal, actually, I'll come to you with this one, actually, because you've mentioned some of the challenges that we've seen around social media. And in fact, one simple example of that is that, if I'm being crude here, it took YouTube 12 years to work out that the downward thumb could cause harm. Somebody saying they dislike your content could be harmful or painful for certain people. Well, that seemed rather obvious. I mean, when you go to the theater, there's only applause. There's not applause and boos at the end. There's not ups and downs at the end. You stay quiet if you didn't like it. You don't publicly show your distaste for something. But online, we seem to think that was a good idea. So, Manali, a tricky question perhaps, but how useful is social media as a model for us to have a little bit of foresight about what we might need to see ahead, and not take 12 years to work out some of the harms?
And Ronaldo, same business, mute and broadcast your voice.
Yeah.
Perfect.
My apologies. I'm having a hard time today.
Doing great.
So I think the interactions, right? The reason, well, I'm only guessing. I don't know why it would have taken that long to understand like and dislike buttons when we were hearing about depression in teenagers way earlier, or like just sitting and waiting for those likes to come about. We were getting dopamine hits. We knew something was happening. And I think, sorry, just on that point, I think it takes time. It takes time to understand the true impact of interactive behavior with these technologies on humans. So I don't think there'll be perfect solutions. And I just want to go back to something one of the other speakers was talking about in terms of, I think it was Nikhil who was talking about striking this balance. I completely agree about striking a balance and platforms being regulated. But I'm sorry, I'm not making sense here, but I think one of the things that I'm just most confused by, or I don't know enough about, is how these platforms are going to be able to control the evolution of interactions between people, and how we expect them to do that. And I feel like a lot of big tech right now has fallen short of that. So when we get into a world where I guess I just imagine a very creative metaverse where the rules are out the window. I just don't know why people would want to gravitate towards that, um, following the constraints we have in the physical world. Um, Actually, Richard, could you just repeat the main question that you wanted to take off on the learnings from social media?
Yeah, that's the main question, Manan. I think you're definitely getting towards this. Is it something we can learn from? Going to get caught out in the way that, for example, perhaps we didn't understand trustworthiness online as we went into the age of social media. Perhaps we thought that if organizations like Facebook did something that was untrustworthy, we simply wouldn't use that platform. Like in real life, if somebody breaks our trust, we tend not to associate with them. Of course, that wasn't the case. And we found for a variety of reasons that we were continuing with platforms that were degrading our trust, particularly around data collection. So, lessons came through from social media. Are they applicable now to the metaverse, or a little bit like the dawn of the social media era? Are we going to find new areas and big challenges to understand what we're dealing with in the metaverse?
Okay, so interestingly, I don't think we never understood trust. I think all relationships are founded on the principles and the basis of trust. All contracts, all our relationships, physical world or whatnot. I think we traded. Um, I don't think we understood what we were trading on social media platforms, and that was data for convenience. And we didn't understand what the data. I think that was the issue. And I think once we started understanding that these companies were effectively making money off our data, um, trust took on a whole different other meaning. And so I think that's the biggest piece that we need to, the lesson that we would be taking into the metaverse from an AI perspective anyway, that's the only one I can speak from, is data ownership, understanding what it is that we are contributing to and what we have control over within the metaverse. I think that would be the biggest lesson globally to take into this.
Yeah, and let me pick on that you were hinting at a little bit, Manal, is about this human-centered aspect of it. So how will Metaverse reframe this human-centered experience? Because there is, essentially, there is a human in the loop who is impacted from an AI perspective. And then I want to ask the rest of the speakers the same thing is, how is it going to inform or impact humans?
Sorry, Kevin, I just had a little bit of difficulty in understanding the question there.
Oh, yeah. So the question is really just, how will the metaverse impact the human-centered experience?
Ah. Okay, so, and I know Nikhil will probably have something to say to this. I, again, from an AI perspective, right? Like the human in the loop or not in the loop, I do think the way we'll understand who we are as humans within the metaverse will be through the help of AI. I think AI will help personalize our experiences around us. Like that's the generative potential of AI, as well as the ability to take our data, right? Like our data is a proxy to how we behave within certain spaces and make the metaverse content within the metaverse more human centric. And that's why at my company, that's what we believe is building greater human machine empathy for machines to adapt and better understand us as humans so that the interactions aren't this like othered away from us. And that's how I think we would make the metaverse more human with AI anyway, is to teach them through storytelling, because we fundamentally as a company believe that storytelling is the operating system of humans. And if we teach those frameworks to machines rather than how they're being trained right now, alone on like technical, mathematical equations, I think that will be a more human-centric approach.
Yeah. If I may ask the same question to Nikhil, what do you think, Nikhil? How will this metaverse impact this human experience, this human centeredness? And you earlier were hinting about uh, people being from different countries, different cultures, and so I think
Yeah.
there is a disparity here. Could you speak about that?
No, absolutely. I think ditto to what Minal said. I think number one, Kavya, so when we consider metaverse, we are not just considering social spaces where we are, right? We are also considering a large sectoral of growth of companies, organizations, and how their customers interact with the organization. So I think from a human experience, one is the form factor change. We've been looking at our PCs, our machines, and our equipments in a 2D world, right? It suddenly changes to 3D. So we've got that change of an experience. Number two, let me ask you a simple question. If you want to look at different cars in a car from a car dealer, it'll rather be fun if you could go into the metaverse, look at those cars, look at change designs before you even have the physical car at your doorstep to actually try. So that's a change in experience, but that's also saving of time in terms of what a human would experience. Number two, metaverse is also, I told you, these are 7 layers, right, as before. So these 7 layers really also include digital twinning, right? So we are today creating twins of cities. There are twins of planet Earth as well, to understand how the climate really operates and what we could do. That's a huge change from a species, from a society of what we are looking at. Number four, if I may say, is from companies' point of view, an organizational point of view, it's a savings of OpEx, right? Which we've been doing from a long period of time. We actually have an OpEx reduction in terms of when we put up a metaverse where people can do it. Suddenly the whole system is on. It's continuously on. And isn't it better to not connect to a chatbot, the rusty old chatbot, but actually connect to a person in the metaverse? That's huge, right? And that's the change in the experience. So largely experience, in some cases, helping corporates to reach out to people better. In some cases, increasing the net promoter score of both the organization and the individual connected to it. And in some cases, creating simulation models for us to look at how we can save better and how we can save the planet Earth. But one point that I wanted to add was it's also a removal of barrier of languages, right? And I've told this before in one of my talk shows with Richard that India, where I come from, is a land of 1645 dialects and 27 mother tongues, right? And if even within India, I have challenges in talking to people from other parts of the country. Now, if metaverse comes in, AI can play a bigger role in translation services where humans can connect to each other in this. So it's all about that experience.
I want to hop over to Karen in a second and talk about sustainability before we open up the floor. Microsoft's incredible reputation these days for its commitment to the planet. But Nicola, I want to stay with you just for one more moment around some of the ideas that you're sharing there. Predominantly, describing this as it could be a great leveler, as it actually could reduce the digital divide and the gaps around the world. It certainly makes it easier to do these things without the cost of planes and travel and hotels and those sort of things. But it sounds like you're going a little bit more beyond there to how the actually might help inequality. Have I understood you correctly?
Well, that is absolutely right. So if you look at India today, and I'll only talk about India, India today has got about 1.2 billion mobile phones at this point in time. So, sorry, can you hear me now? Is it better?
Good now, thank you.
Yeah, perfect. All right. So
good, yep.
What I was saying was that, what I was saying was that if you look at India today, India is a country with 1.2 billion mobile phones today. We have a total population of 1.3, which really means that at least every home has one mobile phone. If you go and we also see that there is a large change that is happening from the rural part of the country rather than the urban part. So we are very well endowed. We are actually here on this planet. We are actually in the metaverse. I'm talking to you. But there's a large number of people who are in the rural sector which are faced with challenges and problems. Metaverse is that leveler. The kid who is in the rural sector today has a mobile phone and he goes and plays PUBG, for example. But he can also enter in this metaverse for leveling out of education, for looking at what the other part of the world is. So when I say it's about it's reducing that digital divide that used to be between urban and rural sectors. I think metaverse is that new internet which is going to do that for us.
Thank you for your comments. Very, very interesting. I see a question from Brent that would be great to come on to in just a moment. And I'm sure there's lots of others. I've seen some hands go up. Don't worry, we are seeing them go up, and we definitely want to have this wider discussion in a moment. Carrie, I did say I'd come to you and touching on sustainability. Nikhil's actually led us into that quite nicely anyway, in terms of the ways that we can interact, hopefully with a lower footprint. Personally, I'm certainly a fan of electric vehicles and what can happen with hydrogen, but we have to be honest, and just swapping in the UK 32 million ICE vehicles for 32 million hydrogen electric vehicles is not sustainability. Sustainability is fundamentally changing the way that we travel. And as for one example, do you have any opinions about what the metaverse might mean for sustainability?
Sure. I mean, I think we all saw during the past 2 years that there is a lot of value, whether it's necessary or not, a lot of value in being able to interact without having to travel, whether that's for, sustainability issues or time or accessibility, having lots of different people from different places be able to be together. So I think the metaverse can be great for that. And in fact, I want to amplify what the other two panelists said as far as what that means for a user-centered model. I think the most interesting kind of potential benefits of the metaverse, if we get safety right, is that a user can select a representative identity that really shows maybe something more than whatever is perceived by the rest of the world in their real life identity. People can decide who they really are without the filter of the physical world sitting between them and someone else. And of course, there are all kinds of additional issues that raises. And that's why I say if we get safety right. But it's very interesting to think about how that can empower people to interact at, possibly a different level of authenticity than they might be dealing with in the physical world.
That makes sense,
Yeah,
actually.
thank you.
And we are nearing the session where we take we want to allocate at least an hour because it's supposed to be town hall, and we want to hear from Metaverse citizens. So, Richard, what do you think? I actually, received a message from AWE Live where this is being streamed. The message was, do we need new policies? And so after this question, we're, definitely within in-world, everybody's encouraged to ask questions, come up with to handle this new world or this brave new world, we're going to need new policies. What could those look like for that take sort of this human-centeredness in account? Any sort of comments or ideas?
So we talked a little bit about regulation and whether or not we thought new regulation would be required. So I'm going to assume the word policy is intentionally different from regulation. And I will say, Microsoft has a set of responsible AI principles. We call them principles rather than policies. And in fact, I believe that if our policies and our principles, whatever you want to call them, are sufficiently grounded in the human, are really human-centered, then I'm not convinced the metaverse requires new policies. I think that we may need new engineering solutions or new approaches to remain true to our policies and principles in the metaverse. But for example, so I'm a member of, I sit on a committee with the XRA, the XR Association, and we're talking a lot about privacy. And of course, there's a core principle or policy of notice and consent, right? True, real, understood, full consent. I believe that principle applies just as well in metaverse and in the world of AI as it does when you're buying a car, to bring up a previous analogy. But the question is, what does real consent mean in the metaverse? How do you really explain to a user that they're paying for a product with their data, for example? How do they really understand what that means? So I think the challenge is not so much in revisiting the principles, although that's always a useful exercise, but in thinking hard about how those principles apply in this new user-centered, citizen-centered technology.
Fantastic. Thank you for that insight. And it's great to
May,
hear
may I
that you're
jump in
part
there?
of. Sorry, Richard, go ahead.
Yeah, I just love to ask Carrie a sub question on that. Quite a direct question. You know, over Christmas, we saw a huge amount of a particular brand of VR headset being sold, and that headset is a fraction of the cost of others that would be potentially considered to be similar devices or competitive devices. Do you have any thoughts about consumer warnings? I mean, does there need to be something on the packet that explains, you know, why is this $300? Why is this $900?
You know, I can't speak to the notice and consent experience for that headset because I haven't gone through it myself. I do think that, you know, we are all aware of many companies, not just that one, that operate a business model that is based on data exchange for services or product. Um, I have no position on, you know, whether or not, like, I think as long as people totally understand what they're doing, you know, I I guess that's a legally binding contract. But I think it's hard. It's hard for people to really understand what's happening. And so, again, it takes us back to this principle of notice and consent, citizen first, making sure that people really understand what they're getting into. There's no surprises. And we said earlier, and I said earlier, that if the industry is unable to remain true to those principles, there will be regulation. And I think we've seen that in the privacy space for sure.
Excellent. I think we should definitely now go over to our audience. And so the first question is being asked by Yash within Allspace VR. Yash, go for it.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, so I come from a research background in robotics, and I recently moved into digital twin. My question is around the topic of organizations being able to use multiverse, right? We understand that there's going to be some sort of environment where we have shared assets. Can we agree on that? My question is specifically for Nikhil, if I may.
Yeah, we can. Yes, yeah. Go ahead, please.
Yeah. So in that scenario, how is it any different? Or this is just my curiosity, but how is it any different than we having to share one cloud environment for that sake, right? Because if we create a computer-generated model and we are showcasing something, it might be a digital model, it might be a replica. We simulate something and we present it to our customers. How is Metaverse going to be different than that scenario, if that makes sense?
No, it really depends on the use case. Yes, I think if you the only difference is metaverse is going to bring that phygital concept much more closer to you. Where I say that if the robotics or robot that you're building were truly a hardware machine that you were looking at from a cloud perspective, today you would also have the power to control it from anywhere else, right? You could do that before as well. But I think again, metaverse is a more misnomeric term, right? It's been just put in over there.
Yeah.
You could actually have it even before in the same way in a shared space. You could have a shared asset. You could have controlled it through the cloud. Well, this is one of those ways in which you could also. So there are two ways in which you could do this. Number one is and we would count it as metaverse, or you will now not count it as metaverse, as the case may be. If you are physically separated out or in a distant location from that hardware asset, and you're able to work with it and get feedback, then we would say that these are one of the layers of the metaverse that you're looking at, right? And if you and if you don't do it, it becomes a kind of stationary side-only object that you do with the hardware. So I think it's very difficult to describe. Number one, it's also very difficult to actually, if you may say, distinguish between what's metaverse or not. But the layers of the metaverse, if they're used, we would say that you are in the verse somewhere, right? You may not really produce everything. Everything may not be experienced. Something of it could be software and IT. So my third layer on top of hardware and devices was if you could build software and IT, which means robotics. So.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Yash, for that question. And let's go over to then inboard. We have Madma who has a question. If you could unmute. And please share your question with us. And if you want to direct the question, you can specifically direct the question to one of the audience. One of the speakers, sorry.
Okay. Hello, my name is Madam. Thank you for doing the presentation to the hosts and the guest speakers. I have a few. I have a few that I'm not really sure who would like to answer. However, I am an older lady who is trying to manage the new metaverse and all that it brings. Knowing little bit about technology and the social media platforms and things like that, the language sometimes over the head type of thing where I try and understand, I go to meetings, I go to listen, but I don't grasp quite everything that's being said. I listen to the people who, like yourselves, who bring the information to me, as I'm not able to go and research all the incredible information that's now being presented to us. Having said that, and being an older learner, um, can we really know? Can we really know what we're getting into? Can we really truly sign those documents? Is one of my questions. Also, oh, and I do want to just throw that out there that yes, we are saving the world. We are not emitting our carbon footprint all over the place with our cars that go everywhere. We're not going to work where we're nasty with people and tired all the time. We can work from home. And when we do get together with people, we can actually enjoy their company. We can enjoy a village and community setting, which I think the metaverse is going to bring to us to be able to do that and possibly get together with people.
Thank you so much, madam, for that question. So let me just kind of sort this through. So first, really, you're really asking, like, can we really truly believe it is what it is that you're signing? Can we really, because it's all digitally coded. So I
Yes.
definitely, when it comes to documentation, signing, and all of that, or just, just your experience, like, can we actually establish what's real, what's not? And that's a
Mhm.
really good question. I want to go over to Manal. Manal, if you could unmute and sort of share with us, because you guys are also dealing with, you're utilizing AI to specifically attribute to some of these aspects. So, what do you think? Could we actually establish what's real, what's not real, and am I signing the correct document? Like, and how do we do that then?
I do think the question actually has to be more to do with the people who are older, who are learning and don't understand the terminology. What could
Yeah,
be done in order to actually include them and teach them?
There you go.
I wanted to pick up on that, Madam, because I really resonated with the point you made there. And I was going to ask Kavya to respond to it. And I want to hear from Manal too, of course, in a second. Think about blockchain and the lexicology, the language. Just let's pick a few minors, nodes, tokens, hash, gas fees, Ethereum. We don't know what these things are. It's a new language. And you could argue that this language has been put in from an elitist perspective to keep people out. And it can be very harmful. Kavya, are we in danger of that in the metaverse, of terms that Madam has to go onto Google and start trying to understand what they even mean, when we could just use a simple way of saying it if we wanted to be more inclusive?
So Richard, thank you for bringing me in, and Manal, sorry, I'm gonna go over to you right after, but you're right, Adam. From a, from seniors' perspective, I think we are not being truly thoughtful. And the person that I want to kind of point to, there are several journalists, one that actually closely works with XRSI. She's part of the Metaverse Reality Check. She's the founding member, Laurie Segal. Laurie Segal, she started a media corporation. And that this is where, we are all citizens, and it is our responsibility, one, to, just like you did, ask the question. And then the second is what Laurie is doing. She's like, this is personal to me. People will be left behind. And this is also personal to me as Kavya Perlman, as people have sort of started saying, oh, cyber guardian, what does that mean? Is really to highlight this aspect. We are making things way more complicated, especially for elderly, and they will be left behind. I mean, I remember the times that I was, trying to secure Second Life and other virtual economy stands are the virtual reality platform, and it still didn't feel inclusive enough. Now we have this MetaMask wallet, exactly what you said. We are really at the danger of. So I think the potential solution to this is really to be really mindful, but at the same time, from ourselves, we could demand for better, delivery, better UI, better UX. And when people start to talk about inclusivity, it really does include every single human being that may or may not come in contact with this technology. So this digital divide is going to be more amplified if we aren't asking that question. So I want to thank you for pointing that, because these things are getting recorded, and every single word we discuss here is potentially a policy aspect that regulators have to consider. They have to understand that elderlies are not going to be able to understand these complex, conversions. So who's doing the translation? You know, Laurie has taken it upon herself, and there are several others who are constantly trying to translate things, simplify things for every generation, especially for children as well. But you're specifically asking for seniors, so I would say that this should go into a very specific policy, and I'm glad that this is being addressed actually for the at least internet era, like at the White House level. One of the 13 executive orders that President Biden had issued in his first like 20 days in the White House was equity. And so this equity must contain, these equitable policy must contain these very specific languages that lay out some sort of a mandate to simplify things, to actually conduct, why are we only conducting user experience research within a certain demographics? We should conduct user experience research in all demographics and then simplify these things to adhere to cater to their abilities or disabilities, whatever, meet people where they are. And that's going to be necessary. So I think from the bottom up all the way to top down, this is so important. And thank you so much, madam, for that particular question. And I
Yes.
invite you and welcome you to with us, with
Absolutely.
XRSI, with Microsoft, whenever time permits. I do want to move on to the next question, if that's okay with you, madam.
I do actually have one more question that has to do with something that was brought up.
Sure.
The authenticity to identify yourself based on not seeing the physical perspective. Um, if we uh, disassociate our avatar with who we are, we can tend to actually, I do agree with you on that. I think it was Carrie who brought that up. I'm not sure, but I do agree with you on that. I'm also interested in the need for being able to give our personal information, our emails, things like that. I know safety was a big concern during this panel discussion today, and I would like to say an experience I had just last week where I was teaching people English. I have English as a major of mine, and I had gone into a forum where I was joined up with a team and I was welcomed to the team and I was going to be a teacher for this. I won't mention them, but then I went home elated. I told my children, and then I was told that I needed, as a requirement, to give my personal email in order to be part of the team. And I didn't agree with that. I bowed out. I did give them a personal Discord, which I might say I had to learn how to use, which I did specifically so that people could contact me here so I could be in a position to be able to assist. I don't understand if we'll in the metaverse will be having an address of where we live or an email that is self-included in the metaverse itself so that we can be all inclusive that way, so that we're not looking at that disassociation of our avatar that will help identify the self that we have within. What do you think of that?
I think I want to go to Carrie, and I think Carrie was totally hinting at that, is really just like rather than new policies, you really need new tools to make this actually a reality. What do you think, Carrie?
Yeah, so I would say my expectation is that the degree to which identifiers, whether that's your email or an account name or whatever it might be, would either be required to be submitted or would be shared will probably be up to the particular metaverse or the platform. I wouldn't assume there's going to be a universal kind of standard there, at least unless something gets legislated or agreed by contract. And of course, for your email to be displayed, that's your personal information, and so you would have to consent to that. I'm not sure about this particular company that you're teaching for, but I think the point that to the extent anonymity
That
can
actually
cause a
was
lack of safety, like for
that
sure, we've
actually
all
was
seen
a
that. We
world
all
here
know that
in
people
Madam,
feel
August.
empowered
let her finish first. Sorry.
that people feel empowered to behave in a particular way when they have less the likelihood of ramification for their actions, and anonymity is that. So whether or not we will find a push for associating people's online identity with a real world identity is an open question, but I think if you look at trends for regulation around the world, it certainly seems like it's something that is worth considering could come about.
Yeah. And just real quick, I want to bring in Nikhil as well. So from the tooling perspective, Nikhil, and India also has a large population that's elderly. And even with the internet, the traditional internet era, we've struggled to create adoption. What do you think, this danger, how could this be potentially mitigated beyond just policy then?
Yeah, no, I think these are all great points, and I don't have a clear-cut answer to this at this point, Kavya. And to Madam, I think one of the things I just wanted to add to what Carrie said was, see, Metaverse would allow you to dissociate the way you want, but also keep your information at certain liberties, right? So you may want, some organizations would love that you give a little bit of email so that we know who you are. But I think the danger that really exists, and you were hinting across, was who is in front of me, my avatar, and am I being integral? And that was a point that I raised in my last point, was that am I being integral to what I am, and I'm putting that forward, right? Who's going to check that? That's very difficult to check. That there's no tools for that. But what we are doing is India, of course, has an elderly population, but India has a largely growing population, right? We are more in between age to 30s, etc. What we are also seeing, Kavya, is that we are seeing a lot of this push from our kids. In India, if there is an urban home and you have somewhere between 8 to 14-year-old, he would normally be on Robloxes and some of these platforms, right? So my little one, who's about 7 years, actually attends birthday parties on Roblox, even though the COVID and pandemic is over. We're all open, right? So we can go to houses, but they still want to do it on Roblox. It's just the form factor that attracts us. Now, what's happening with that is that some of this tooling that these kids are learning, and largely India also has a lot of, if you may say, a joint family structure. The grandparents are also learning from these kids. So they want to make, so my mother, who's now a grandmother, is actually going on the metaverse to understand what really is metaverse. Where is this kid going? What is happening over there? So I think there's a perspective to it. There is a learning, and there is a point to what Madam said, saying that there has to be a fine print of what we're getting into. I think it'll be very, very different to see how it evolves in different countries. India is evolving in a very different way in what metaverse is.
Definitely. One thing I would add, Madam, and then I want to conclude, would go over to our next person who wants to ask question. Harris, be ready. I would say interoperability could be legislated. We could actually ask our policymakers, like global regulators, to mandate some of these platforms to interoperate. In fact, we are seeing the signs of this thing stemming from European Union, where Europe has said that WhatsApp is supposed to interoperate with other messaging applications. That's encouraging. So if we could allow true interoperability, that means we could mandate a singular identity, which will be based off of something, another technical word I'm going to use is self-sovereign identity. And there are solutions that could be potentially blockchain based or decentralized ledger based solutions that could really truly define that this is the person. You could actually check the integrity of the person, that this is actually the person who they are. And those mechanisms could technically be embedded, that you could quickly and very easily, just like Twitter has a check mark, you could check that. And so this is possible, but this requires this, overall coordination of technology, policy. It's something that, XRSI, we're doing some research around this, and also enforcing some measures. So we're currently actually starting to do a research around impersonation, and especially very, very directed to workplace. So, like everybody becomes Mr. Smith, or people like take your avatar, replicate it. Those kinds of things could be mitigated with control. So some of these questions, we can certainly tackle with technology, but they're limited. We need policy mandates in order to create this equitable future that you really aspire to. And I'm committed, and several, Carrie shared, Microsoft is committed, Tech Mahindra, like everybody who's innovating should be committed to create this equitable measure. So when we advise, policymakers or regulators, this is specifically that I'm going to keep in mind to make sure that this is the kind of equitable future that we in. And thank you so much for your question. Truly appreciate it. Please continue to engage. You are very important Metaverse citizens, and we're going to continue to, demand for our rights. Next is Harris. Harris, please come on and ask your questions. Unmute yourself and ask away.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
You can hear me. Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, well, thanks for allowing me to ask one or two things. First is about privacy, and when you were talking about, it's an interesting concept or interesting term, data data exchanged for a product, something like that. We're exchanging our data to receive a product. I'm just curious, and this question really doesn't just apply to the metaverse, it applies to all of the internet, is that data. So let's say the company formerly known as Facebook, now known as Meta, I have a Quest headset and I know they're collecting my data. Now I'm just curious from the experts. My understanding is that Facebook uses that data to provide to third-party companies to share information about me so that those companies would theoretically target me through advertising. Is that the extent of what's done? Meaning, is my data kept out of, is there an attempt to keep my data out of the hands of bad actors, let's say thieves who want to steal my data? Because quite frankly, I don't care about my data being used for advertising. Because if I did care about a piece of data being used, I wouldn't put it in when I put it into Facebook. But I'm okay with that exchange, and I believe most people are as well. We watch TV and we see commercials, and we understand that that's the price of free television.
It's not limited to that exchange, Harris, but please carry on.
I'm sorry, that was my question. That was my question then.
I mean, unfortunately, those guardrails don't exist. You can't just provide it for get better products, and you can't decide what you're giving and not giving. And if you've got the headset on, and certain headsets can read your gaze and your preference data and where you're looking at everything you do, and the IoT devices on our bodies and so on are constantly transmitting where we go, what we do, what we say, how we say things.
Understood.
We can't turn the tap off, and we can't choose whether it goes to insurers who decide whether we get to go and see our kids next year or not, or to health providers who decide whether or not we get life-saving treatment.
Exactly. May I just add a little bit to that? And then, just in the interest of time, we have several people lined up to ask questions. So I'm going to keep it short. But 2016, I worked for Facebook as third-party security advisor. And there we were trying to, of course, it was all about security, risk, and protection. But no matter how much the companies try, when the threat profile is that a nation state actor wants your data, they will have it. They will invest so much time. I mean, it's literal cyber war. So it really depends on the risk profile of the company. And Facebook has, endured that and continues to. Wherever there is data trove, thieves are going to come and find a way to find the data. So companies have to be responsible to proactively stop that. Just about yesterday, I don't know, you can search that news article as well. Apple and Facebook, Meta, both provided a legitimate emergency order request, which was not legitimate. It was from hackers, malicious actors. So these kinds of malicious activities will continue because data is gold in this era. So I suppose to respond to your question, it's quite impossible to provide foolproof security, in which case you really should look at your own personal risk profile before you hand out that data. And even though you don't think that you care, but that collectively could aid and abate and enable some kind of a cyber war, where you are being manipulated to vote one way or the other. I would caution you to be so progressive about giving away the data just because you want to avail the services. Yeah,
I
there is
understand
really
that.
no
And
answer.
this makes I've heard good pieces of information from a few of you that helped a lot. One other
Thank you
thing,
so
I'm sorry
much.
if there's noise about the
And I
seniors
want to
thing.
take on, sorry,
Okay.
Harris, I'm so
Yes,
sorry.
yes.
I want to bring in Manal to add in her input, and then I want to take on next question because there's several people asking. So go ahead, Manal.
Yeah, I just the statement of like I don't care whether they take the data to serve me advertising. I think that this goes to something I was saying earlier as well. Is I don't and the question that was asked around trust is I really don't think people understand generally what data is. It's not just your email address. It's every little digital footprint that you create. I would really encourage you to look up a um, art project that was done funded by the EU. It's known How Normal Am I? I would ask you to go through that, use your camera on the computer and actually go through that exercise. And that will give you an understanding of the breadcrumbs that are collected on your data. And just to say that I don't care what advertisements are being fed to me I would caution you in that sense because your data and multiple people's data is being used to partition off and really target what is being advertised to you, how it's being advertised to you. And so there's a lot being done to you because of the data that you're providing that you may not necessarily be aware of. So I just caution you to say, I don't care what they're advertising. They could be, the royal they, could also be polarizing your worldviews based on the advertisements that you're being fed.
There you go. That's
Sure.
perfect.
Yep.
Thank you, Harris. And I'm so sorry. I have to move on to Noble, who is the next person who wants to really ask this question. So Noble, go ahead, please.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. I'll keep this short. So this
Thank
question is
you.
for Gary, and something you mentioned sort of sparked interest in this question. What, within your capacity, I know you're not speaking on behalf of Microsoft, what can you speak to regarding tactics, like practical tactics when it comes to those, not policies, but the principles? Best practices to translate these principles into day-to-day design and development of responsible citizen-centered experience. And the context behind that question is that often policy and principles are disconnected from delivery. And is it a carrot approach where it's bottom-up, incentives are rewarded for aligning with core principles, or is it more the stick where it's more top-down enforcement to protect digital citizens?
That's a great question. And I will say, without as you said, without revealing too much, there is a ton of thinking going on with that right now. Deep research. I think you could almost, if you think about online culture creation, it is carrot and stick. There's both. There's always going to be like a moderation and enforcement regime, code of conduct, removing people from a service who don't behave in a way that is acceptable, whatever the standards are that the particular service sets. But I don't think that's enough. I think that we've got proactive tools that users can use to control their experience. Here in Altspace VR, for example, there's a safety bubble, there are mute settings, allowing users to kind of engage at the level that they feel comfortable. I would be interested to see more of that happening in the metaverse. And I think Thinking about how culture is created and social norms develop is going to be very important as we all start spending more and more time in the metaverse, both in a commercial space, but also in enterprise spaces, and understanding kind of what the rules of the road are. And then eventually people will start to almost, I don't want to say police themselves, because of course the solution providers and the platforms will always have a responsibility. But eventually, you know, just as we have in the real world, a culture will develop where bad behavior is, you know, met with ostracism or, you know, social consequences or whatever those may be. And those could be, those tools could be provided by the developer, coins or rewards for pro-social behavior, for example, or they could be, you know, people unfriend you, you get blocked, whatever that could be. So I think all of that is on the table right now, super early days, and thinking seriously about what we can do to help this technology develop in the right way that's not just safe, but safety is just a hop, skip, and a jump from inclusivity, right? I mean, at the very beginning, Richard talked about the few number of women in his, you know, AI lists, and I would hazard to guess that, you know, their safety might be related to that. Do people feel safe engaging in the metaverse? And if they don't, then they stop, you know, showing up, and then you end up with, you know, only one group represented in this technology, which is a big problem for inclusivity. And in particular, if we're talking about this technology being used in the education space or in the workplace, or, you know, anything other than just kind of pure entertainment. So that's not, I know I didn't give you like have a really pointed answer, but lots of big issues swirling around. And I can tell you in my professional life, I probably spend at least 3 or 4 hours a day talking about this and thinking about how we can build out our products to remain true to those responsible AI principles. So definitely don't have all the answers yet, but certainly thinking really hard about what they might be.
Thank you so much, Carrie. And I, you know, honestly, I do love that answer because it hints towards something that we are advocating for. And this experience is a prime example of it is our collective responsibility. So even the tactics, like an organization can give you controls, but you have to understand how to utilize those controls. And then organization have to keep in mind whether you're savvy enough to utilize those controls and adjust accordingly. So this is a collective shared responsibility that we will lead with. Thank you so much, Noble. And I do want to give a shout out to Noble Ackerson, who asked this question. Noble has provided to the metaverse, to these virtual wars, something called as the 3C and R framework, which is adopted in XRSI framework. It's called control, choice, and context plus respect. But when it comes to metaverse autonomy and utilizing neural rights all the way to the extent that is all going to come from, you know, it's the brainchild of, when it comes to solving these issues of privacy, that is definitely Noble's brainchild. So Noble, I really want to congratulate you and thank you for, you know, playing that significant role in helping the industry understand that. And thank you for your question. And we'll go over next one. Juan, if you're here, please unmute yourself and welcome to ask your question.
Yeah. Hello, how are you? My name is Juan Londoño. I'm a AR/VR policy analyst for ITIF. And first of all, great talk. And you guys mentioned about creating a safe environment, like how sometimes platforms are going to have a hand-on approach. But I think like this, like particularly in the realm of content moderation, will require more like a privacy concern regarding how much platforms are going to have interpret what we do, especially non-verbal language, like the ephemeral nature of VR. It's going to create like a content moderation, something like a paradox where we don't want platforms invading our day-to-day talks and interactions, but if they do back off, we're going to have a safety concern. How do you think platforms are going to tackle this problem as VR scales and becomes more mainstream?
Very good question and a complicated one. Thank you for that. How should we feel this? Anyone on the panel? I do know that research is being done. Here, go ahead, Nikhil. Thank you.
No, sorry, I'll just try and answer. So I don't have a complete answer to this. Sorry, I forgot the name of the gentleman who asked this.
Juan.
Okay, Juan. I don't have a complete answer to this, but I think like any other technology, like we've been doing with AI, we are actually going to create some boundaries around it, right? So if I get the question right, you're saying, look, you are talking about verbal language. What about non-verbal signs? I think in certain cases, there's research going on, and there's research going on in my lab to understand how those non-verbal emotions also come out, and you respond to them. So my ideology is, where do you draw that line? There's going to be a box, and there's going to be a boundary that we've got to draw, of how much of an information is collected and for what purpose. So I think these questions of this boundary also would become contextual. What do you really want? Are you trying to? So I'll tell you what I'm doing, and maybe it'll give you an idea. So I'm actually trying to create a new kind of AI for language generation, and I'm actually trying to bring a face around that. But now, language by definition is also my thoughts encoded in my features and what I present as non-verbal facets, right? When I'm angry, I'll talk in a certain way. My features would twitch. If I don't understand that, I don't really understand the sentiment behind what you're doing. Now, should I stop there? The answer is probably yes. Should I not consider faces and only consider the context of the words? I may not be able to gather the semantics of what you're trying to say. So I think it's very, very contextual. There's no clear answer to this. It's a great question, but it's very difficult to answer at this point in time. So the only thing is, you draw your own box. And that's why I said a little bit of self-regulation would be needed by people who are actually creating technology.
Yeah. And one more thing I would say, that, we, from a policy perspective, we gotta really take a deeper look at Section 230 when it comes to moderation. So from a, global regulatory policy perspective. And the second piece is, I am aware that Meta and Microsoft and several other big tech platforms are conducting research in exactly this, the social cues inside these environments, and how to moderate that. You can piece that into different use cases. So workplace, you're going to need heavy moderation. Medical, you're going to lean on the doctor to be more ethical about it. When it's like Wild Wild West VR chat type of a lobby environment where everything goes, then you're going to have to hold the company accountable, VR chat accountable, make sure that that is not the case. And children are not exposed to those, sort of adult experiences. So different use cases would probably demand different things. But let's go. Thank you so much, Sultan, for that question, and thank you, Nikhil. Let's go over to Jedi Bobcat, who, please unmute yourself and go ahead. We really want to listen from you.
Here we go. Let's see. Alrighty, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah, so I look at the name of this event, the Metaverse Citizens Forum, and I just checked the definition of the word citizen. And one of the things, at least the dictionary I checked, said it's a legally recognized member of, a nation or a commonwealth or something like that. And I find that really interesting. Earlier in the pandemic, I helped form a collective of artists that would do online parties. And we had parties that lasted 24 hours with people from every single time zone, coming in to a virtual space. So I look around here, and if anyone on the panel there turns around, we're in India. We're at the Taj Mahal. And if I had known this was going to happen and there was a conference, and I would have had to make sure my passport was up to date and get a visa to go, and then find my way out to this place, I would be an American citizen hanging out here in a foreign land where I'd be probably surrounded by citizens of India and all sorts of other places. If we all wiggle our toes, everybody in the audience here, wiggle your toes, and then ask yourself, am I the same as my toes? I don't think you are. If you had an accident and we cut your toes off, you would still be who you were. So there's a separateness between who we are as people and our bodies. And here we are able to come together with virtual bodies and overcome the tyranny of distance to come together in a place. So the idea of a citizen, coming from a nation, it can be argued whether or not nations are still useful in the world. But here we are, a group of people, kind of like Burning Man community, who come together and think a lot of us overlap with our value systems and principles that we want to live by. If you believe that nation states still make sense, then the question is, who has the authority to create a nation And why does it have to have, why would a new nation need, a dotted line, a temporary dotted line on this planet within which that's the nation? I mean, could we create our own nation with our own, I think I heard the word constitution earlier, a set of agreed upon principles where people, 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 regardless of where their bodies are, can come together and have that. I mean, I understand I'm wearing an Oculus as well, and that's owned by Facebook, but or it comes from Facebook, and there's all that going along. Who's messaging me? I just maybe I've said enough, and maybe that can get us started. But I look around, I'm like, I feel like I'm in India with people. What's the actual difference?
Yeah, I mean, thank you so much for saying those things. To not to answer your question, but to at least comment on it. I personally founded MKAI. It stood for Milton Keynes, a new town in the UK, artificial intelligence originally. COVID took us online. And now we kind of just go by MKAI, but if you want to call us something, sometimes we talk about morality and kindness in artificial intelligence. Found hundreds and hundreds of people around the world who absolutely are our brothers and sisters in wanting this newer era kind. People aren't necessarily on our doorstep, and we do seem to be a small group, bizarrely. That's less about us, I think, and more about the state, everything else, harm and everything else, and the anger in everything else. That we're standing apart from just not wanting to be a part of that fear. This is another way of us getting closer and uniting. Remember how empires fall. If you want to call this an empire, how do they fall? They fall because they run out of money. It's not going to happen. All because legislation, government, something bigger forces change. Maybe we'll see. Or empires fall when those on the peripheries find each other, agree, work together, and find the common ground. People, organizations, civics groups, businesses. An incredible opportunity. One way of viewing it, but got to break these models. Profit at all cost models, these lies, these myths, this nonsense. Money and about success and about status. It's for us. Of us, we can make a huge difference, I believe. Stop there, but allow anybody else if they want to just comment before we move on.
My God, Richard, that gave me chills. And thank you so much for that question, Jedi, because that really is the purpose of being here. And Richard, wow. I'm like literally goosebumps. I wonder if our speakers have comments on this about just the very existence of the citizens collectively in this world through the metaverse.
I would love to weigh in if I could.
Go ahead, Manil.
Thank you for that question. It's been on my mind a lot. And Richard, I really don't want to take anything away from you. That was brilliant. I think it's important for us to understand that us, humans organizing as nation states is a relatively, in the history of mankind, is a relatively recent endeavor. And, we've come across as civilizations, as empires, then as nation states. And I would argue, or I tend to argue anyway, that the evolution from nation states has already occurred, and that the nation states are trying to hold on to power through the regulations. But I think it remains to be seen how, global regulations play out within data privacy or, competition law, whatnot with big tech. But I argue that big tech already colonized us or colonized our data. And so we became effective, I wouldn't use the word citizens, netizens, I guess, or datazens. But, our data resides in multiple company coffers. And then I already believe we've organized the internet's organized itself even within the chaos as to where our data is. And within the metaverse, this is where I would love to see us break new grounds, because it remains to be seen whether big tech gets there first or if there are new organizational entities rising that will, the game world's going to come in, or the metaverse is being built on game principles and game worlds. And so I'm really curious to see who the next organizational nexus will be within the metaverse.
Thank you, Manal. And let's go over to our next metaverse citizen. In fact, is Jaisal. Jaisal, thank you so much for helping organize this forum. You've worked really hard behind the scenes together with XRSI and MKI team. So please go ahead, ask your questions. And I'm truly grateful for you for being here and helping us support this whole event and experience for everyone else.
Thanks, Kavya, so much. I hope I'm audible. Am I audible?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we have been hearing a lot about self-regulation. We have been hearing about, you did mention that, about the regulations around children. Now, can we, I just want to understand that since it's a whole 3D world and the way it is reaching out to the audience, how are we going to be protecting, the ability to observe, to learn, and all other things when it comes to the vulnerable crowd? That is my concern, I think, regarding the vulnerable crowd. How are they going to be understanding the difference between the real world and this immersing environment? And is it going to affect their abilities to observe, understand, sense, hear, etc.?
Thank you so much for that question. Sort of points towards this multi-sensory experience, and people may or may not have that ability, especially vulnerable population. When you're talking about vulnerable population, you're talking about children or disabled people or all that. Thank you, Jessel. I look to maybe Harry. What do you think? This directly points to sort of aspects of diversity and inclusion, and this multi-sensory aspect, because everybody understands things differently. What are your thoughts on Jaisal's question?
So I think this question is as much about metaverse as about how people access the metaverse, right? The whether you're on a head-mounted device or you're on a phone or you're on a PC, you're going to have a very different experience, especially from that kind of immersive multi-sensory point of view. And when we are talking about very young children, I'm not aware of any head-mounted device that is kind of approved for users under the age of 13. I think that's just because of the size and shape and weight, and but I would consider teens to still be vulnerable users. I think the safety issues, the ability for teens, and not just teens, but anyone really, to kind of create the cognitive dissonance to understand where they are, and honestly, not just to understand where they are in the metaverse or in digital space, but to maintain an awareness of where they are in physical space. There's a physical safety issue. It's not just psychological safety, or even the physical effects of kind of something experienced in the metaverse. I'm talking about, I don't know, you're distracted because you're in the metaverse and your child, climbs up on a chair and falls over, like that very kind of tangible type of safety risk. All of those are things that we're grappling with and trying to figure out how do you, and not just for kind of the neurotypical user, but for users across the accessibility spectrum, young users, people who aren't as familiar with the technology, maybe less sophisticated users, people on a wired headset versus a disconnected headset. There are so many variables to thinking about how people engage with their hardware and what that means as far as the safety experience. I can't, Giselle, I can't really give you one answer kind of what's the solution for that, just because there are so many variables. But much like with the other question, I will say, we're spending a lot of time thinking about it for sure. And I think in some cases, the aspect of letting the user control how deeply they engage and when they engage, even to the point of like through what kind of hardware, is an important avenue to getting to the right solution. There is, we started this talking about how this was a user-centered or a citizen-centered technology, and I think putting more focus on a user's ability to kind of control the extent to which they engage, not just how they share, not just what they share, but even how they interact with the technology is a good start to getting us to a place where people can feel safe in the way that they understand safety, right? And that might mean they're comfortable sharing lots of data. It might mean they're not comfortable with that. It might mean they're comfortable with a fully immersive VR experience. Maybe, like in my case, they want to experience it on a PC. So I think that those kinds of choices will be more and more important for having real inclusion and accessibility and the safety that comes from that in Metaverse.
Excellent. Thank you
Thanks
so
so much,
much.
Kelly. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jessel, for that question. If I may add just a little bit to it, is again, it's a shared responsibility. One thing that I do want to demand from organizations, trying to support is, why are these controls, let's say there are controls coming in, such as we saw safety bubble, pop up. Meta formed like a safety bubble or a safety boundary. Like these kind of measures, back when I was working at Linden, we had that on like day 10 or day 15 because somebody harassed me in Word, and I was like, wait, what? How is this happening? So right away we spur up, safety bubble boundaries, and they were customizable. And so, and then we educated people that that's what the case is. 7 years ago, Meta started to sort of distribute these VR type of stuff, and now it's taken about 7 years for them to finally do a safety bubble or boundary. So my question is, it's not that they are not taking into account these things, is sometimes you need to be in a prevention mode and a proactive control mode when it comes to these experiences, especially when it comes to vulnerable population, because when it comes to a child, their mind is still developing. And that 13 plus that everybody talks about, that's a disposable box on which that 13 plus is written that companies can use to shrug their responsibility and legal responsibility. Beyond that, once that box goes in your closet and you're, mom's doing something, child just slaps on the headset, and suddenly they're exposed to abhorrent things going on that they shouldn't have access to. So we have to really be honest. 13 plus, what is 13? It's just a number that companies are using to shrug legal responsibilities. We have seen endless amount of videos where children are already accessing stuff. Virtual striptease. Imagine that? A 5-year-old having access to something so abhorrent like that. As an adult, we should have access to all these things, but these are things that I would really demand organizations to be just a bit more proactive, because in the virtual worlds, in these immersive environments, you can't unsee things. Once sexual harassment takes place, which, it's a horrible thing to occur, and it's very personal for the individual. They are scarred for life. And it's just that personal in these virtual worlds. And that's why, please, all these organizations have to be proactive. In XRSI framework, we are specifically highlighting prevention measures. We have to actively, proactively protect people from getting exposed to these things, not after the effect. Once sexual harassment has happened, once a child has seen all these things, they're scarred. And so thank you for that question. And that's where the understanding the vulnerable population, just saying, oh no, we don't allow 13 plus. Like, no. Let me show you at least 200, 500 videos where children are already accessing these things. What have you done to actually address that? So that would be like, something that I would continue to and advocate for that. Thank you, Jessel, for that question. We have another question or next person. and I'm
Hello?
sorry if I'm missing the name. Hi, Harris. Oh, you again.
Oh,
Hey.
hi. Yes, me again. This format, the forum is great. Great people, great thoughts. I wonder if there will be anything where we can have deeper discussions amongst the audience as well, and be allowed to, let's say, jump in and maybe dispute something that somebody says without having to unmute ourselves, without this control.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
I'm happy to take that
Yeah, go
one.
ahead, Richard, please.
I mean, look, it was Malcolm McLaren, wasn't it, who said the medium is the message. And wherever we are, whether we're here in alt space, we're on Twitter, we're on Telegram, then there are certain dynamics that are unescapable and that attract certain kinds of conversation, actually certain kinds of people. So, Harris, it's absolutely a great question. And it's an area that MKAI spends a lot of time focusing on. And how do we create the kind of spaces where it isn't them and us, where it isn't the expert and the person that's supposed to listen, and as an art form, and we're still learning. But this isn't the space for it today. But it's something that we are constantly striving to every month. So every month we have an inclusive AI forum, and it's exactly as you say. It's open 45 minutes before for people to come in and just talk about where they're at, what's happening. We just chat. What's your day been like, right? Which is as important as policy in the world. It really is. And then we keep that session open afterwards. So we run for a couple of hours, then we're open, and the mics are open. We want a situation where cameras and mics are on. Of course, we don't want background noise, but we want people to be able to interject. We want people to grow together and not see a them and us. And absolutely, after the sessions and come to one, we'd love to host you and have you there. It absolutely is that. What do you disagree with today? What was wrong with this? What's right with this? So we run that sometimes for another hour and a half, 2 hours afterwards, until everybody's said what they have to say. So we try, but it can't be everywhere. It has to be in certain spaces, certain times. And this is slightly different format. And let's get what we can from this, and let's get what we can from the other times as well.
Totally. And as we are wrapping up and we're on time, and I go over to each of the speakers. But before I do that, I want to invite and encourage, and thank you so much for this question. Harris, your timing is amazing. You point to, what was supposed to be my wrap up is we are a community. So this metaverse community, we are expanding the community on different modalities. So on Twitter, there is a Metaverse Citizens community. We are meeting every Sunday. And I'm so sorry, this Sunday was the third Metaverse Citizens, Twitter Spaces, and which I kind of bombed. I was really kind of feeling not okay. But the third one will happen this coming Sunday. And then we have LinkedIn group that Richard, MKAI and XRSI has formed. And we keep very, very close eye as to not to make it our third-party vendor promotion. We really try to cater to human-centeredness, human rights. There are different modalities of assembling this community. Right here, though, in this type of a Metaverse Citizen Forum, when we bring people in immersion, we want to bring in next time, hopefully, we will hear from and I'm not going to name because the commitments take a lot of time. We are opening dialogue with U.S. House of Representative, who is currently engaged with children online privacy reform. So those kinds of voices are really, really important to bring together, to make available, accessible. And we are also open, we have already opened dialogue with United Nations, European Commission. These kinds of regulators is important, and I congratulate and thank Carrie for staying here with us in that sort of a listen mode, and more times that we're going to bring in regulators, representative from big tech corporation, because we shouldn't be talking at them. We have to stay together with them to help them understand what our concerns are. And then, Harris, you're doing such a remarkable job. What your opportunities and your achievements are, those are to be celebrated. Yourself are bringing communities together. But that's what the point of this forum is to facilitate, to bring that sort of that modality. Beyond that, there is Twitter, there is LinkedIn. You're welcome to reach out to Richard, and you're welcome to reach out to me, I'm sure. And then, we've got a few minutes left, but I really want to go over to Manal, then Carrie, and then Nikhil, please. Any parting thoughts? How was this experience for you? what are your any key lessons for us, and how do you see us moving forward with the community in this direction? Go ahead, Manal.
I just want to thank you for having me here. Honestly, I learned a lot from the different questions that were being asked, and the main thought that kept coming to my head is just how early days we are and how important it is to start having a forum for these kind of discussions to happen. There are a lot more discussions to move forward, and I think one of the earlier for avatars that had asked a question around what about old people accessing this, and I think about the access piece and the equity in access quite a bit, and I think that's what we're doing with the work that my company is doing and the work I personally believe in is making AI more accessible. There will be multiple technologies that get included into the building of the metaverse. And so I speak from a position of AI. There's a lot of issues with AI that we're slowly working through, but part of it is that it's only a certain segment of the population, and I wouldn't even say full on global population, it's those who have access to either the knowledge base to understand the very deep research or the resources to be able to do that. And so that AI isn't accessible to all yet. And to take that very powerful technology into understanding our identities within the metaverse is yet another abstraction from what the technology actually does. And so my thoughts, I guess, at present is how can we continue to make an intuitive understanding of AI more accessible? And conversely, how can we get machines to be more empathetic towards us as humans so that we can have a safe and inclusive experience with AI within the metaverse?
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you, Manal. Over to you, Carrie.
Sorry,
Yeah,
that took me a
go
minute.
ahead.
Yeah, this has been really interesting, super fascinating. I loved hearing the questions and what the other speakers had to say. It's definitely showed me, there's so many questions out there and the user research is super important. I'm excited to see where this goes and, would love to stay connected and hear more of these kinds of questions and concerns from others in the industry.
Thank you so much. Nikhil, words, and
Uh,
then Richard, we will
yeah,
close with you.
no, thank you so much, Kavya and Richard and others for calling us. I think it was a wonderful event. I think I'll echo what other speakers said. There's so much to ponder upon when I had a blank slate when I entered the event, but now my mind's buzzing with ideas. I think we need more such forums. Like I said before, I think the metaverse is like the new internet with new form factor, with new experiences, or maybe new worlds. It's not without its perils, right? And we do have to balance that self-regulated behavior while giving space for all of us to innovate. I think I started my lab or this R&D center about 7 years back with the sole aim of saying, can machines and humans collaborate together? I think what this forum has told me, one more thing, can humans and humans collaborate better in this new metaverse, right? And I think that's my parting thought.
Thank you so much. And Richard, any last words? And then let's invite everybody to take a picture together.
Wonderful. No, just gratitude from me. That's all from me at the moment. Thank you to our three speakers today. Really enjoyed learning from you, hearing from you, and look forward to staying in touch. Kavya, thank you so much to you, the team, to Matthew, to Marco.
Excellent. And I really want to thank all of the people behind the scene. I want to thank AWE. If you are not in here, you're probably watching AWE live. And so we'll continue this partnership to bring these events in different accessible forms to you live. Thank you, Matt, who is also the XRSI Immersive Events Director. And thank you, Marco, Maniano, who is behind the scenes, handling camera, handling all sorts of strategies, is also the co-founder of XRSI and president of XRSI Europe. Thank you so much, each and every one of you, for existing with us together and bringing your thoughts, your ideas, your concerns, your achievements. It's so wonderful to hear from you. And if you would be kind enough to come together, now is the time to jump on the stage and let's take a selfie together to commemorate this moment of this, first time, actually second time, coming together as metaverse citizens. It's kind of a monumental, historic moment, and then we hear more and more people, senators, different government representatives, Microsoft playing such a massive part into these ecosystems, and other big corporations and innovators like Manal and Nick Hill and everybody else, and our own roles as a civic organization. I hope we are doing it right. So let's all just throw some hearts and put some emojis and let's take some pictures. I'm guessing Matt is the one who is taking a picture. Matt, do you want to be in the picture? Go do it. Thank you, everyone, so much. Thanks, everyone, for watching live or who was watching live. And we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, everybody.